Hello there, and welcome to another ClueCon Weekly. We're very pleased to be here again, bringing you all of the best guests and best people from around the open source communication world. And this week is no exception at all, because we've got open source veteran Bogdan along with us. Hello, Bogdan. How are you doing?
Hello, David. Thank you for the invitation. I'm glad to be again part of the ClueCon Weekly. Ready to chat, to share experience, and yeah, to make the audience happy.
Great. Okay. Well, that's why we're in business. We'll have to talk to interesting people about interesting things, and we've got both here because you're very, very heavily involved in the OpenSIPS project, leading it as you do. But before we get to that, I wonder if you could give us a little bit of a sort of a history of Bogdan, and you know, how you come to be leading the OpenSIPS project as you do now.
Well, that's a bit of a long story. I will try to make it short. Everything started roughly almost like 20 years ago when I joined the Fraunhofer Focus Institute right after finishing university. That was the first time I got in touch with the VoIP, with the SIP world. And at that time, there was the SER project, which started inside the Fraunhofer Focus Institute, together with other, I think, like 3 or 4 people. We were the first, we were the core team, starting from scratch everything. And after a while, there was a decision, okay, to go open source with it. And along the years, I think around 2004 or 5, the institute basically didn't want to manage it anymore the project in terms of the open source aspects, and that was the OpenSIPS when OpenSIPS came in, you know, trying to continue the whole idea. And again in I think 2018, there was a split of the core team of the OpenSIPS project, and we ended up with the OpenSIPS. And you know, third time it's the lucky one. We had a quite stable and continuous development since then. So we yeah, 3 years ago we actually celebrated like 10 years of OpenSIPS, which is quite a remarkable achievement. Especially that year by year we're trying to come up with new releases. So it's a continuous development. We are not just sitting there and you know, just fixing bugs, but we are continuously evolving to meet the needs of people in the VoIP business.
Yeah, indeed, and of course, it's not just a case of adding features and functionality, you know, for the sake of it, or that you want to, or even that your community asks you to. But we live in a changing world as well, and things like stir and shake can come along, and then you need to react to those.
Yes, that's something that we are very proud of, the fact that the whole project is driven by the needs of community. We are trying to listen through all the possible channels like mailing lists, Slack communications, or whatever other kind of you know, interaction we have with the community, to find out what are the let's say the real needs out there in the wild, where actually people are trying to build different kind of VoIP solutions, and again to address exactly those needs. And yeah, as you mentioned, that was one of the examples, the stir and shaken that was done last year, again as a direct need of what's going on right now in US with the new legislation in terms of fighting against the robocalls and things like that. But we do exactly the same in with other kind of feature in other directions. So we are not just focused on let's say the US market or on a certain kind of features, but whatever comes into our attention from the community side.
Yeah, yeah, there is power in an open source community, as we both well know. Tell us a little bit about Bogdan, where you know that OpenSIPS gets used around the place. Any particularly interesting use cases? I know from experience in open source that, of course, we don't always know where our projects are going, because that's one of the beauty. They kind of have a life of their own. But any ones that you can talk about, because of course I know there's probably ones you can't talk about as well, but ones that have come to your attention that stand out in your mind.
Yeah, that's true. What you said, you never know exactly who's using the software you are working on, because yeah, that's how open source works. You know, anyone is free to go and download and use it, and that's it. Um, uh, Trying to address this kind of let's say issue, we have a running form on the OpenSIPS website where actually companies, let's say, using OpenSIPS, they can register themselves. So we have a who's using OpenSIPS webpage, where it's a quite long list of companies using OpenSIPS. In the same time, worth mentioning, probably visible from, so no secret about it. It's seen from the sponsors list of the OpenSIPS Summit. We have Twilio using OpenSIPS. We have VoIP. There is Bandwidth, like one of the most, let's say, the most big names in on the US market in terms of using. And surprisingly, there is, you know, each of them, they have a completely different way of you know, addressing different kind of aspects of the infrastructure, VoIP infrastructures with OpenShift. It's not like, you know, everybody's doing more or less exactly the same. You know, it's some cases like access points, it's typical, let's say, LDCs, or maybe doing APIs or whatever. So, you know, it's a quite versatile tool when it comes to you know, what exactly you want to do with it.
Yes, yes. Again, in the nature of open source, you put something out there, and then you find that people in the community start pulling it in directions that you'd not quite imagined, and contributing to it. And so, you know, it ends up doing things that you wouldn't have thought of before, or getting used in circumstances that you wouldn't have envisaged. And that's part of the open source game.
No, that's perfectly true, and you can see it on all levels, like macro level when it comes to development directions, and also to very, let's say, micro, low level when it comes to features. Like I know, release a new, you know, kind of a small medium feature, and then people start reporting, hey, if we combine this feature with already existing feature B, you'll get some interesting behavior, and so on and so on. It's like, okay, we never thought about that. It wasn't in the plan, but okay, you know, now that you mentioned, yeah, it makes sense. So let's try to make them both. You know, the old feature and the new feature works in a completely different way. Yeah. So uh, at a certain point, there are so many features and versus so many scenarios that it's impossible to foresee in all the combinations when you actually develop something new. You know, this kind of mixing will be done actually by the community, and it will help you at the end of the day to, you know, properly integrate all the features that you have in a more coherent way in the software in terms of usage.
Yeah, indeed. Now you mentioned OpenSIPS Summit there, and the people that the different organisations that sponsor it. And I know that, I mean, common with everything. Sadly, you've had to call that off for now. Uh, is that do you plan to reschedule that, or are you going to leave it for this year and we'll go for it next year?
Yes. So yeah, we had to cancel. Actually, again, that was something coming from a community decision. We ran a poll to see what's the feeling of the community about taking the risks
Mm.
for traveling and versus our, let's say, desire to share knowledge and information with the rest of the community. And overall, we said that the idea was, okay, let's play on the safe side. At the end of the day, people are the most important.
Mm.
And yeah, the decision was to postpone. Now we have to. The plan right now is we are looking for, I don't know, September, October, somewhere over there. But to be honest, I'm still a bit concerned about the evolution of this pandemic at this time. I'm not really 100% convinced that even September, October, it's still, let's say, a possible time window.
Mm.
Uh, Even if things are settling down, you still have some, there will be an residual fear for traveling, for getting into crowds, and not to mention the economical impact on many companies, budgets for traveling and so on being cut and so on and so on. So yeah, at least officially the plan is to postpone, but there is also the plan B eventually to run some online event shortly for this year, and keep it going for with the full flavor for the next year.
Yes, it
Yeah.
would. The full event is definitely a worthwhile event, and of course, with the online thing done by video conferencing or whatever, people can get the information, but you can't go on a boat trip together, can you? And you can't
Yeah, that's
sit
sad.
around the table and share a drink and all that kind of stuff.
Yes, yeah, okay, that's a disadvantage. We will have to, how to say, to let loose the socialing part of the event. Nevertheless, each year we combine the OpenSIPS Summit as an event with the new OpenSIPS major release. So basically, the event it's an opportunity to introduce a new release to the people, to the community, and
Mm.
to describe and talk about all the new features in the release. And with the online substitute, at least we try to keep the part of introducing the new release to the community and postpone the socializing for the
Mm.
eventually for the next year. So yeah, we have to decouple these two parts of these two components of the summit.
Yes, yeah, and as you can imagine, we're in a very similar position with ClueCon, our annual event, which we love running, and it is still kind of on the board to go 3rd to the 6th of August. However, that is looking questionable to say the least. And so, although we're still got it advertised and we're selling tickets, and the tickets are 100% refundable, we have an eye on the situation, and we'll have to play it by ear. Now, you mentioned new releases, Bogdan. What release is OpenSIPS currently at?
The upcoming release is OpenSIPS 3.1. So we are on the 3.0, 3x actually line of releases, and all of these will. This line actually aims to bring some new radical changes or new radical concepts in OpenSIPS. I'm saying radical changes because so far the, let's say, 1.x, 2.x releases were very much contained in the idea of having OpenSIPS as it started mainly a SIP proxy. So all the features which are developed so far were focused on again on the based on this concept of a SIP proxy. Of course, there were some cases where the boundary of what a SIP proxy is allowed to do or not. This boundary was stretched a bit to the limit or even crossed with different features, but Starting with the 3.1, especially, we definitely say, okay, we want a bit to offer more than the simply um, uh, typical proxying of the calls. We have a lot of so far we had a lot of features again focused on proxying, different kind of routing mechanisms based on qualities, on prefixes, on whatever, authentication, a lot of backends for different kind of things. But looking at what the community needs, so what's the feedback more or less from, let's say, from the industry side, there is a more and more need for advanced kind of features, mainly features requiring combining the combination between multiple SIP calls. And just as a disclaimer, we don't want to go into the back-to-back area, or we don't want to change our way of handling the call, so to turn into kind of a back-to-back or something like that. We just want to create additional layers that will um, make simpler for script writers, for the OpenSIPS users, to manage multiple calls in the same time and eventually interact between the calls. Just to give you just a short example what I'm talking about, let's say a typical example of injecting calls into, injecting media into an existing call. Typically, that's done with a back-to-back, where you have a leg, first leg going to the media, playback leg, that leg ends, and then you connect to the, let's say, real callee side. Well, we have a different approach because we still like to be a proxy, so you still have the caller and callee directly interacting through a normal SIP call, but we create an additional call from the proxy. So from OpenSIPS, we originate a completely new call to a media service just to grab an RTP, and then playing with re-invites, we just combine the RTP streams between the proxy call and this new call to the media server. So basically, at the end of the day, you still have a proxy call, but you are able to exchange RTP streams with other calls that you have.
So does that mean, Bogdan, that there won't be a need for a media engine like RTP Proxy or RTP Engine or indeed Asterisk or FreeSwitch in some uses?
In some scenarios, there is no need for definitely as time as you do media oriented services, like eventually recording or playing back in order to inject media into an existing call, you need an external media engine, which can be like a FreeSwitch, can be an Asterisk, or anything like this. In some scenario, additionally, you may need an RTP, let's say, tool on your side. Currently, we are using the RTP Proxy for a situation where you have actually to clone the RTP stream. So for very basic RTP-oriented operations, like when you do the call recording, you create a completely separate leg just to send RTP to the media, to the media recorder. But in the same time, you have to have inserted in the original proxy call the RTP proxy, just to create a copy of the RTP to be sent to the recorder. So basically, that's a quite, let's say, passive way of recording the calls, completely invisible to the endpoints. You don't need to do anything special in terms of for the proxy call. That remains the same without complicating your scenarios, or overcomplicating all the combination between the features. You keep the same proxy approach, but you can create additional legs in order to interact, to inject, or to record media. That's just a typical example.
Yeah, very, very interesting approach. Now, I do think that you've got a web page or a slide or something prepared to talk us through some more information about 3.1. So shall I pop that up?
Yep, definitely.
Okay, here we go.
That's the webpage for the OpenSIPS 3.1 planning. And just to summarize a bit what we are trying, which are the main goals of the release. We already talked a bit about this call media bridging, so basically the ability to inject or to capture the RTP stream of ongoing regular proxy calls and to combine with other existing calls that you may create towards a media server or a recorder entity. So that's a very important feature that we want to. Actually, it's already available in the 3.1. Another important part of the 3.1 release, it's the so-called the calling API. Basically, we want OpenSIPS to expose an API which will allow external applications or eventually web pages or whatever to create, to monitor, and to manage calls through OpenSIPS without actually being at all aware of the SIP stack or the SIP details.
Great idea.
Basically, exposing primitives like creating a call, answering a call, terminating calls, doing transfer, attended, unattended transfer, music on hold, and these kind of features. An important note, this is not like the WebRTC, let's say, feeling where you actually have a web client or an external SIP client. In this particular case, the end user is still using its regular phone, but the regular phone is used just for the audio capability, so just to to have the device to speak to and to listen the audio. All the controls of that device can be externalized through the API to some other application, which eventually can
Right,
be
yeah.
again a web interface. So from the web, you can control your device in terms of placing a call from an online buddy list, or you can terminate the call. And even more important are the advanced features. For this release, we are aiming the call transfers and the music on hold, and maybe some hardware phones or software, let's say they don't have this capability, so you can
Right.
use the phone just for the audio side, and you can do all the controls from web in this
Right,
in this
and of
case.
course, and if you've got it in web, you've effectively got it there for kind of in-app call processing as well, haven't you?
Yes, not to mention that you gain more power and flexibility in combining the calling feature with other kind of features. For example, you can have a listing on your web page with the ongoing calls, and simply doing some drag and drop, you can implement a very nice way of doing the call transfer. So you can combine with searching for the numbers, or searching for the party to calls, so with a kind of an agenda,
Right.
and for dialing, and or even for putting together kind of a, let's say, call center behavior from agent perspective. You know, when you have the incoming call, you can display some additional information on the website, and at the same time you have the full control of your SIP device in terms of rejecting, accepting, or dialing calls, or transferring from the website. So you can easily integrate with other applications, with non-SIP or non-VoIP applications.
Right. Great stuff. And what about some of these other things on here, the per call hooks? And
Yeah,
it,
these are some of them are quite, let's say, potentially low level, so difficult to understand for people who are not necessarily familiar with the OpenSIPS scripting. So I'll try to focus more or less on things which are more visible in terms of usage.
Yeah.
Like a great extension of the DTMF support, using both RTP engine and RTP proxy. Right now you are able to intercept at the OpenSIPS level the DTMFs from the RTP. So because the RTP can be, the DTMFs can be sent inside the call in multiple ways. Can be like a SIP message, like an info. In that case, okay, there's nothing special, that simply works, get access to it. But in most of the cases are an separate channel into the RTP, so the so-called 101 um, um, event channel.
Right.
In this case, using again RTP proxy and RTP engine, OpenSIPS can gain access to the in-call DTMFs at the script level, and then you can do more call control. So, for example, you can control if you want to mute call recording. So let's say you do call recording through SIP using SIP. In that case, you can do in-call call control through the DTMFs. OpenSIPS will read the DTMF sequence, understand when one party wants to put on hold, let's say, the recording, and then will through the SIP will protocol will instruct the media recorder to stop the recording. So again, by getting control, getting access to the DTMFs, you can combine the ability of controlling the calls with the ability of uh, um, interacting with the user through the DTMFs in order to say, I want to perform an action on the call. Again, typical example, muting, or maybe um, uh, let's say doing on hold, off hold to the DTMFs, or even parking or anything like class 5 features.
Yeah.
It's a pretty cool combination of multiple features, like
Yes. It opens up
DTMF
a wealth of
versus something
possibilities.
else. Um, Yeah, scrolling in this, as you see, it's a quite long list. Yeah, all the time we have this kind of conversation with, inside the team, inside the core team. Like um, with each new release, we are trying to challenge the previous release in terms of complexity, volume, and so on and so on. And to some point, we're gonna hit some limit in terms of how much work can be actually done within a 1 year cycle release. So yeah, well, we are trying to sometimes to refrain ourselves from putting too many things on the list, because we are free to dream and to wish more and more things, but we have to face the reality in terms of how many things actually can be done.
Yes.
Um,
Just a quick question, Bogdan.
yes.
I think I know the answer, but when you've been thinking about all of this different functionality, how do you prioritize which parts to work on first?
That's a good question. Actually, I have the answer in this very page. At the end of the page, we have each year we do a community poll to see to get feedback from the community in terms of the importance of each feature. So we try to come up and present a new, let's say, to pack a new release in terms of feature set. Maybe the feature set is quite extensive, extended in the very beginning, and then we present this set to the community, and running this poll, we get the feedback in terms of what the community thinks in terms of importance. So in this case, you see the results, like what the community is actually
That's a
what the,
very, very excellent and transparent way of doing things, because if you don't do it that way, then of course there's room for whoever shouts the loudest or has the strongest opinion or whatever. But here you are presenting the community with information from the community. So that's excellent.
not only like who's being the loud in terms of asking for new feature, but in the same time, we realize that we as developers we may have a completely different opinion on what's important as feature set versus what the community thinks of that. Yeah, let's say we are looking at the same thing like the OpenSIPS project, but from different perspectives, and of course, these perspectives are a bit altering, the let's say the priority set. And as I mentioned in the beginning, we want the project to be community driven as much as possible. So that's why we said, okay, it's not only what we think of in terms of priorities for the releases, like what features will be in. Let's go and validate everything with the community.
Yeah, great stuff. And on the community, do you find that you do gather a good amount of community participation, or is it sometimes difficult to get the feedback you need?
I would say each time was we got a very involved community, and the feedback was very helpful for us. So that wasn't a problem for us. I have to admit, actually, the problem is, again, in most of the cases, it's not necessarily coming from the community side. It's maybe coming from outside, from our side as developers, and we are trying to learn things and improve things. Mainly by our natures, we are developers, we are engineers, we are not so social to a certain point. So from our perspective, usually communication is through code, and that doesn't work in the relation with the community. So we are learning, and each time we are trying to improve this, let's say, this approach of each time going and asking the community, what do you think of that? What do you like to have? Or let's do some planning together in terms of the roadmap of OpenSIP. So as I said, I don't think it's a community problem. It's more for us as team to be as open as possible and as how to say, verbose and communicative with the community actually.
Excellent. Well, it looks like there's some very interesting and useful stuff coming down the line in 3.1, and it's been very edifying to see that poll at the bottom. I wasn't aware that was the way you ran things, and I can see the sense in that. We're coming towards an end of our time together, Bogdan. Is there anything else you'd like to mention before we say goodbye?
Just wrapping up a bit of information about the release. In terms of timeline, we expect to have it the first beta release somewhere in mid May. We stretch a bit more than usual because, again, this year we escalated a bit the shopping list that we have for the release. So yeah, we need a bit more time to actually get it done. But the target, yes, it's in May, and probably to compensate the lack of the summit during that time of year. We will work out a way with some presentations and online presentations in order to present in more detail, so to introduce all these new features to the community. In the same time, for everyone, just keep an eye on the OpenSIPS blog, it's blog.opensips.org, because each time when we finish developing a new feature, we write the blog post for that, trying to explain as much as possible in terms of what are the problems addressed, how it works, what are the benefits, and so on and so on. So it's not necessarily a super technical description, but in terms of what the feature is good for and who should be interested into it. So it's a good source of information, this OpenSIPS blog.
And did you say it's blogs.opensips.org or
No,
just
it's blog.opensips.org.
Okay, thanks for clarifying that. Great. Okay, well, it's been a pleasure having you along, Bogdan. It's been great hanging out with you over the years at various AstraCons, ClueCons, as you were saying just before we started recording, all the cons.
Yes, yeah. Last year was also the JanusCon. I think it was the first. I'm not sure what will happen this year because with this time all the.
I think they would have loved to do another one, and they were probably planning towards doing another one. The Lorenzos and the other folk that are involved, and the lovely Celeste. As of course, as you know, because Lorenzo and Celeste are very involved in OpenSIPS Summit as well. But like many other events, it looks as if it won't be able to go ahead physically.
Yeah, that's true. Well, we will see how the things will let's say evolve. Hopefully in a better way. So yeah, we're gonna have sooner the possibility again to to socialize in the real way.
Indeed, very enjoyable. Well, Bogdan, thank you very much for dropping by to the ClueCon Weekly Studio, and I look forward to the next time that we get to chat.
Thank you, David. It was a great opportunity.
All the best.